Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. Very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator podcast. As ever, Carl and I are delighted to welcome an intriguing, dynamic guest. He's got a lot of swagger on social media, lots going on in this guy's world. So we're looking forward to talking to Freddie Woodward, former Olympic diver, the sort of man who stands on a high diving board and throws himself off it, which most of us can relate to and never want to do. So, Freddie, very warm welcome to you. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Very, very happy to be here and chatting with the two of you.
Great. Well, listen, obviously, as everybody knows, Freddie, and as you know, we're very much about talking about the transition post-sport, and there's lots of things that you're involved with and things that you've done, which we'll dive into today. Pardon the pun. But the start point we always have is just a quick reflection, because it's nice to set the scene for the listeners to understand a little bit about your career. You've been in the Olympics, you've done some amazing things, Commonwealth Games, and within your sporting career, if you had to pull out one or two of the fondest memories, the things that elicit that sense of pride, now that you've retired, you look back, what sort of things come to mind for you in that regard, Freddie?
Sure. Well, obviously, results-wise, the Olympic Games is the big one. You mentioned the Commonwealth Games. I was a bronze medalist at the 2014 Glasgow Commonwealth Games. Also a bronze medalist at the European Championships as well in 2017. I think in terms of results, those are the big ones. Probably one of the things that stands out most from my career as well, actually, is being told post the Olympic Games in the sort of British diving manager review meeting that several of the other athletes on the Olympic team, which was the most successful diving team ever at that time, had specifically named me as being a very positive contributor to the team environment. And they were, basically delighted that I was on the team. And then the managers told that back to me. And I've told the story a couple of times, but I think that's one of the things that actually stands out with me the most, kind of beyond it all, one of the most kind of memorable feelings that I take away from the sport, actually.
And that's to your credit, Freddie, and no surprise. I mean, I know you're an ambassador of ATA because we love what you do, what you stand for, the values that you bring, and I think that's indicative of that you're reflecting back on the contribution to that team dynamic and being a good team player, which is to your credit. Now, of course, we could spend a lot of time talking about that career because there's all sorts of wonderful experiences. But if we sort of bring you out of diving and give a bit of an overview of what happened next, I almost feel like there's two transitions here, Freddie. There's what you did immediately post diving, which we'll come on to, and then as you've sort of closed the door on that, you're now going through a second transition. So give us a brief sort of overview of when you said, right, that's my professional sort of diving career coming to an end. Where did that take you? And then a little bit of a flavour of where you are now, and we'll sort of rewind and dive into some of those areas.
Sure. So you're absolutely right, James. There's two big moments, and so the first one was in 2018, and I knew I wanted to finish competing, and that was very clear in my mind. And a friend of mine suggested that I might like doing a show diving contract with Royal Caribbean. I thought, brilliant. That's like 9-10 months in the Caribbean on a big boat doing a show. I get to dive, like that feels like my comfort zone. But a new experience, traveling the world a little bit, it'll be fun. Let's give that a go. And I went into that very quickly. It was, I think, 3 months after retiring, I was in Miami and doing the rehearsals, getting ready. And then I very quickly realized in Miami and then on the ship that actually this is really, really cool. I kind of, in my head, I kind of played it down. I honestly thought it might be a bit naff.
Yeah.
I wasn't, I envisaged, I did zero research, and it was kind of intentional. I just kind of I didn't want to like get all caught up in it. I just thought I'm just going to show up. They've given me this contract. Let's see what happens. But I envisaged like a guy on a microphone, the cruise director, just sort of kind of like, okay, and now we have Freddie from England, and he's going to do a forward 2.5 somersaults in the tuck position, Freddie. And then that's what I imagined. However, it was Cirque du Soleil. It was, a slightly sort of smaller scale Cirque du Soleil, and and high diving and all these other slackliners and artistic swimmers.
Fabulous.
Insane music and lights and like thousands, hundreds and thousands of guests. I was like, wait a minute, like this is full power, and I get to dance and do aerial stuff and like other random things, and I'm on scuba like in the show, like whoa. So it was supposed to be a sort of a 10-month sabbatical, and then I would probably go back to the UK and find a real job or get on with the rest of my life, have a revelation about which direction I wanted to go in, something like that. Whereas I realized that actually I love being a performer, and this is brilliant. And you mentioned there just from my intro, James, about the sort of like the team enjoying like the team element of things, which I really did. Suddenly I was in this environment where everything I did that was good supported everyone else. Like, so everyone in the show doing well only helped each other. There's no, there's a little bit of competition, like you still want to shine, of course.
Yes.
But it's a real team environment. Everyone is supporting each other. The better you do, the better the show is, the more the audience enjoy it. It's just win, 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 win. Technical team as well. And then even, the ship in general, you want the guests to have a great cruise. And so everyone contributes to that. So I really enjoyed that. I loved being on stage. And I found it was a sort of my second calling in a way. I thought, this is, now that I've gone through that really like tough and disciplined, what was it, 16 years up till that point of competition diving, elite level, it was a really welcome change and also new challenges. But still, I think at that moment, I hadn't completely reinvented myself, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still kind of holding on to the diving, obviously. And also holding on to my life is exciting, everyone, if I'm being completely open.
Right.
And that was something that I think was important to me. But then I kind of progressed through Royal Caribbean. I did 5 years or so, 6 years with them, with a small kind of interlude, obviously during COVID, when nothing happened.
Yeah.
And I, became, obviously I was high diving, so doing completely new stuff. And I got onto their kind of the flagship at the time. It was their biggest ship release ever. It still technically is, though I think their newest big ship gets released next month. So I got to this point where I was like, well, hold on, there's not much more I can do here. There's not much more like development. I didn't see myself going into any other area of the ship particularly. There was maybe an angle could go into sort of show creation, that sort of thing, being on the other side, but it never really took my imagination fully. But I was with my partner at that time, so she's a Japanese artistic swimmer, so we worked, lived, formed together, and suddenly we were both like, we're done.
Right.
We're not coming back here anymore. We want to develop the rest of our life. We want to find what that's going to be. And I don't believe, and we want to develop as people. And we just suddenly felt like, I don't think that that's here anymore. And you mentioned the 2 transitions, but really, even though now I'm 30 years old and I retired at 23, really that was the big one. And I'm still in the midst of it, because this is where I really had to reinvent myself. Like I said, the one before was more like, oh, actually, I almost stumbled straight into a great job that paid pretty well, and so there was a niggling feeling always in the back of my mind, but like, what can you do that's not this? Mm-hmm. Where is diving, or like having loads of big stage presence, like in front of in a water show, like what's that going to do for you beyond this? But it was just kind of niggling away. Really, I didn't face that full on and think, okay, but what really, like, what am I going to do? Who am I going to become? And yeah, so that's what I've been really facing up to in the last year, and making loads of progress, but also, inevitably, they're big questions, right? They're big
Yeah.
problems. So it's
Oh,
something.
100%. Well, let me pause you there because this is fascinating. Before we go into that second transition, if we will, because I think there's an interesting thing, and I'll
Yeah.
throw it back to you, Carl, because I know you've got a couple of thoughts on this. But that identity crisis that we see a lot of athletes wrestle with,
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense what you've done. You almost kick that can down the road, and so a lot of
Yeah.
people struggle. What am I going to do? This is who I am. You've no doubt about it gone into a completely different space, a fascinating space. You're on the cruise ships, you're traveling the world, you're in all these
Yeah.
high energy shows, but it's still diving. And
Yes.
so that will relate to a lot of listeners. We talk to a lot of sportsmen and women that perhaps drift into coaching because they're like, well, I can coach because I know this. And they go into a space that feels right. But a lot of people talk to us about exactly what you've said, a bit of a niggle, but is this all I'm meant to be doing? Is this a security blanket? Am I sort of staying within my comfort zone because it's still within my sport? And so that's why I wanted
Yeah.
to pause you, because I know you've stepped out of pure diving now and exploring new areas. But Carl, before we jump forward, I'll throw it back to
Mhm.
you on that first transition element.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story, Fred. Oh God, yes, interesting story. But yeah, just I suppose back to the point in which you made that decision of, and you said yourself, I'm done with competition. I'm
Yeah.
tired. I'm 23 years old, and then you fell into the world of showcase diving, cruise ship diving. Just take us into that mindset of the point of view. You're an Olympian.
Mm.
You've got a couple of bronze medals from serious competitions. Take us to that point of I'm done with competition, and sort of what that looked like in that period. And
Mm.
secondly, to support your idea of I'm going to leave the world of competitive diving. Prior to the cruise ships coming along, what was your mindset around what it was you were going to be stepping into? Or was it just purely a case of I'm going to leave diving and then just see what happens?
Honestly, I'd love to tell you that I had this, perfect plan. However, it's pretty much what you described. I would say that I've, for better or worse, and I think it's mixed, I've, through most of my life, carried this feeling of sort of general optimism that things will kind of work out. And I think I was partly kind of resting on that, maybe relying on that a little bit. But my honest take is it was kind of lazy thinking, really. And me, I believe now it was me trying to avoid the consequences of the feelings I would get coming face to face with myself. Really, like what situation I'm in, and what skills I've got, what I can really do. My frustration with the sport, it was a few things. Well, my frustration, my reasons for wanting to leave, but it was a few things. Injury was a big one. Um, I'd and I'd achieved my goal. I mean, you could say that the big goal, would always be, say, Olympic gold medalist, for example. But in my case, for whatever reason, I didn't have that as a goal. I had the Olympics as a goal, and I also think that's a mistake. Like, why wouldn't I do that? It doesn't really make any sense, particularly. So again, I think if I went back, I would probably be a bit more proactive with goal setting, and more ambitious. Like, I had the Olympics as my goal, but why not? Why not say? I think it was limiting self beliefs that actually stopped me from saying I want to be Olympic gold medalist. However, that means that in that moment, I'd achieved my goal. Um, but what I did after Rio was I kind of looked at what was the difference between me and particularly like the top six in the world. And the biggest standout thing, and this was the thing that's caused me issues throughout my entire career psychologically, was a difference in strength. Like, those top divers were just doing some bigger dives, and also they just had more airtime, so they could also do the bigger dives more comfortably. Whereas for me, it was like I needed the perfect takeoff, and that was a lot of stress. And just by not going as high, you just, you lose a mark or so from the judges on each dive. So that's where I saw the big deficit. And so I just went really hard in the gym, and I was doing like, what do you call it? German resistance training or something, with 10 sets of 10
10 sets
squats.
of 10.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Yeah. I was doing that like 3 times a week, like back squat, deadlift, back squat, like that was my week. And I just went, I basically went too hard, and the tendons in my knees just sort of gave up. And so I was still able to dive, but the pain the quite extreme pain resulted in a real lack of strength, actually. And even just like I couldn't go to the cinema because I couldn't sit with my legs bent, because after just like 30 seconds they were just like throbbing. So I had toned things down. I didn't gain any of the strength in the end that I wanted to. I wasn't able to train in the way I wanted to. And then there was other people coming up who were all of a sudden, I had an edge on them in 2016, but suddenly it's 2017, 2018. I don't have that edge anymore. My funding is coming into question. And also I was still in the same, really, I was still living in Sheffield. I was with the same coach and the same team who I love to this day dearly. But my world ultimately felt small. I'd achieved my goal, and I felt like what I would need to give to get that extra bit, let's say, final in the Olympic Games, top 6, potentially a medal, what I would have to give to get that just didn't feel like the right trade-off anymore for me. So that was when I threw the towel in, and I was very happy to do that, actually, at that moment. But you're right. Then I stumbled into the performance world and really, really enjoyed it. But then, and then that kind of kept me in that space for another 5 to 6 years. With that identity crisis just sort of looming in the background.
But I think that's a very, very human answer, Freddie. And I think a lot of people will relate to that, because you've touched on, again, probably 4 or 5 areas where people will be listening. Injury, the goal, you've reached that level, the repetition can grind you down. Same environment, same place, same geography, same coach, and it's nice to hear that, because it's not weakness, it's not failure. Some people are like, well, this is what I do. I have to do it till I'm. We had James on an episode recently talking about cricket. You're not going to play till you're 65. We have to have this moment of realization that it's okay at some point to say, well, this isn't fulfilling me anymore. It's a big world. There's lots of opportunity. If injury, body, dynamics, mindset, all of those things are pointing you somewhere, then you've got to trust your gut. And as you did, have the courage to say, I'm still a young man. I could keep doing this, but I think actually I want to explore other areas. And it's interesting because you say, well, I didn't have a plan, but I do sometimes think, whether you're spiritual or not, when you have the courage to make a commitment to a certain path, doors start to open. So you make the decision, I'm going to step out, and all of a sudden there's this opportunity. Hey, come to Miami, have a look at this. You said at the start of the episode, I'll do this for 10 months, 5 or 6 years later, you're doing it. But if you hadn't made that decision, perhaps that opportunity wouldn't have presented. Now, again, talking of courage, you're then at that point where a lot of people might say, well, Freddie, this is great. You're working and traveling the world with your partner. You're in luxurious cruise ships. You're a performer. You're in a great team. There's lots of buzz, adrenaline. As you said, you've been well paid. But then you got, again, probably a bit like when you were 23, saying, I feel like I'm done with competitive rowing. Took you to a point where I think I'm done with this performing within the cruise ship arena. And so this opens up the second transition for us. And I'm interested in this because you're showing quite a lot from what we know, getting to know you as an ambassador. There's a lot of a sort of entrepreneurial spirit. There's a lot of experimentation. You're involved in a fairly diverse array of different areas. And I think that aligns with what we see a lot. A lot of existing athletes, a lot of recently retired athletes have an entrepreneurial itch, that they feel like they want to do something, they want to experiment, but perhaps are lacking a little bit of that courage to step into it fully. So I think it's always nice to hear from people who are saying, I'm fully in it, and I know you're traveling the world, you're doing multiple things at the same time. So tell us a little bit, give us a little bit of an overview of post the professional diving in the cruise ships. What sort of areas you're dabbling in now, and sort of bring that entrepreneurial spirit to light, and I think that will inspire people to see, you know, the energy and the courage you're bringing to explore and experiment.
Sure. So it one of the first things was, well, you actually, I'll start with this because you mentioned the sort of spiritual side of things, and this is just something that I think is fascinating. I Years ago, I went on I had a Kindle, still do, and I went on it. Right, I'm gonna like scour the internet for sort of, you know, self-help books, you know, personal development books that sound interesting. Not just personal development, like just non-fiction in general,
Yeah.
but like interesting, well-reviewed non-fiction. And you know, there's probably like 40 or so books here. And so whenever I finish a book, I just like scroll through. I'm looking for the next one, and I've decided, clearly, my partner and I, that we're no longer doing the cruise ship stuff. And now I'm back. I get sent back to the UK. She gets sent back to Japan. So we've got about 2 weeks apart. And it's like my first night in my bed in my mum's house, you know, where I'm just staying for a couple of weeks. And I look at my Kindle and I'm scrolling through. Okay, I've got to start a new book. And that Think and Grow Rich was one of the books that I was recommended, and
Yep.
so I downloaded it. But because of the title, I always avoided it. It doesn't really sound. I'm not interested in that. And I read it. Well, and I started reading it that night, and I'm lying in bed, and it just immediately, that it was such a huge turning point for me. In those first 10 pages, I was like, okay, this is it. This is different now. I'm already a different person, and I think for so long I'd been, you know, I'd had this confidence in the world, but I wasn't facing it properly. Because I think, one thing I realize now is there's a difference between being a dreamer and actually an actioner. So if you want to be successful, dreaming is, I think it's amazing. But if you're not doing anything about it, you're just kind of crossing your fingers.
Yeah, well said.
And I kind of realized that that's where I was sat in that space, I think, for a few years. So I then, perhaps what I decided to do then was, okay, like, what do I need to learn? So this was also a little bit of a mistake, I think, in hindsight, but I thought, okay, I need to learn some new skills. What's the most important and relevant thing I could learn right now? And in that moment, it was AI, basically. It's just been over the years progressing and progressing. Well, over the years, over the last couple of years, have been progressing. You know, I was very interested in ChatGPT, and I'd been, using it for like little things to that point, mostly like travel related. And then just thought, yeah, like this, the world is going to change. So if there's anything I should learn now, it's probably not like, doing some kind of, I don't know, probably for me, it's like not going back to university at this, like, I didn't go. That was something I had in the back of my mind, like, do I go to university? Do I like, and it's like, actually, it's probably not that. It's probably, let me learn as much about AI as I can. And then with this sort of extra thrust of energy I got from reading the book, Think and Grow Rich, I then decided, okay, I'm going to do that. So I paid for a course on that, and also then started traveling with my partner Chica. So I was kind of studying, doing this course, doing my own study, using things as much as I could, experimenting and trying to sort of build a business model from there. The other thing, but also that was very, I was kind of going from zero, really. And the issue I had there was I was kind of going from no industry experience, because yes, I have experience of being an athlete. I have experience of the cruise ships, but suddenly it's the cruise ship world, like Royal Caribbean, they're a 14 or whatever $billion company. And then what, they're going to hire me to be, maybe long-term if I make that my full goal, but, it's not like just working with like, barbershops. It's very, trying to break into, say, the cruise industry where I have knowledge, difficult. So the mistake that I was thinking about was that I just kind of went very wholeheartedly into, okay, I need to learn about this and I'm going to do it, which isn't a bad thing. But I also think I could have afforded to take a step back in that moment and really assess what was important to me, what skills I did have, and what might be, and therefore with those things, what I'm interested in, what my values are, what skills I do have, and then maybe what I need to learn on top of this to say reach this new goal that I could say create for myself, and then take things from there. And so I kind of realized after a while that my process had been, oh, I've got no skills from sport, so forget all about that, and I'm just gonna like start from zero. So yeah, not very helpful to me because obviously it's not zero. And so there's all kinds of things there which I was sort of disregarding. So then I've realized that, and I've gone down. I've also stopped running away from social media, which I was doing for a while, if I'm completely honest. Again, I was very sort of intent on being like in the moment and present and all those things, which aren't bad things. But again, I think really I was lying to myself because I was afraid of what people would think of me if I would put myself online more, even though I knew that might give me access to the kind of life that I envisage for myself.
Yes. Just let me jump in there for a second, Freddie. Sorry to interrupt your flow, but again, you're hitting on points which are so relevant in that the curiosity is something that we encourage everyone to explore. And as you know, anyone who's watching this rather than listening, you can see from the backdrop here, I absolutely love to read, and that book's on the shelf. I think it's so important, whether it's podcasts, books, courses, your mentors, to explore that curiosity and find the fuel that drives you and that energizes you. And we hear this a lot, and you had that, wow, it talks to you, it gave you an energy, it gave you a drive. The second thing, though, is to have a little bit of support about what we're going to do with that curiosity, because as you said, it's a bit of an analogy, golf like the unheld hose pipe. It's there's energy, but it's going all over the place. And I think part of our job, where Carl and I work really hard with individuals, is on that coaching element to really establish some clarity. Where are you? What, exactly as you said, what are your values? What interests you? Which then helps shape a destination. Now, that destination could feel a long way away. That's fine. It's just like using the GPS in our car. We need a start point, we need a destination, and then we'll develop the route. So I think you touched on something really pertinent there, that people sort of get caught between two stools in our experience. One, they don't explore the curiosity and they feel a bit trapped. And the only thing I know is what I do, my sector, my sport, my discipline, I'll stay in that and then narrow the field. Or they go to the other extreme. They're so excited, they're so energized. Right, I'm going here, there, everywhere. And then they don't get the right traction, they get disheartened, and they retreat back into the comfort zone. And I think the bridge between the two is the right support, mentorship, coaching to say, you're right, you're energized, you've got the curiosity, let's harness that, but give it a bit of structure. So I know I'm reverberating exactly what you've said there, but it's important because a lot of people fall into that trap. So you've obviously gone all in on the AI. You're traveling, which I love as well, because it's another thing about getting out your comfort zone. And then that's why I said the social media swagger. When you announced the ambassadorial role with us, I think it was on a beach in Vietnam. So you get the prize for best ambassadorial announcement. But where's the AI element taking you then? So in terms of, you've done the research, what's the sort of plan with that now? How do you sort of see that developing as a business opportunity for you?
So original plans slightly, well, kind of sort of failed in a way. I had, originally I went down one avenue and I was trying to help nutrition coaches specifically.
Right.
I got in a position where I was trying to sort of rush things. Like my skills weren't high enough to do like fully competent development enough. So then I was relying potentially on, using developers. And so I was kind of, I felt, and I was very inexperienced. So I sort of had pressure from, potential clients. and then pressure from developers, and I was kind of stuck in the middle, like, oh, like I'm not sure how to fully balance this, is where that sort of got. But I also had this idea for something that I wanted to create, which was with AI photos. And I actually, one thing I did was I paid some developers to help me build that. It wasn't loads. It was like a mini MVP, and so I was working with these developers, but I got disheartened with that because I didn't like the process. What ended up being created wasn't really what I envisaged, and what I imagined was, hold on, and it also, it went from being 1 month to almost 3 months, and I thought, hold on, if this is what it's going to be, I'm going to be in 2 years' time, and it's going to, you know, I can't do this. So then I actually tried to build it myself, which was working. Obviously, it was difficult, but that was an amazing learning experience. And then that's when I really took on even more knowledge. But then with technological advancements, things kind of got the idea sort of kind of, well, what I felt to be, what's the term? But it just sort of trumped by new technology.
Right.
And again, maybe a wiser me would have gone, okay, so what's the pivot I need to make here to, you know, because you're never going to get the right answer from the beginning, I think. So, you know, it's like you said, it's a GPS and you're driving the car. I think the same is probably true with product development. But anyway, I was kind of frightened by that, and I felt like I'd wasted a load of time. And so I kind of pulled away from that and then shifted into more of a bit more of a freelance position, which is what I then, you know, got some traction with, which is really cool. So there's a couple of elements there. There's like, you know, web app development, but using AI to code things and sort of building things for people like that. And the automation is obviously another side of that. But then the other, if I'm speaking completely candidly as well, then I realized that actually I'd then sort of funneled myself into a freelance model, which wasn't the goal that I'd set for myself originally. So that was just like, it's not a bad thing. I think, you know, doing the work is a good thing, but that wasn't like my goal originally, to go into that fully kind of freelance world. And so, but whilst doing this, I had been developing my social media more, and I really enjoyed doing that. And then also, and I, you know, I was doing some mini projects with my partner. Like we started a food account, like as we were traveling, just like us eating, and that went kind of viral. And so, like, you know, so that became a thing. And then I was also with this, you know, these kind of messages, the transition message, like some of the struggles that I'd gone through, and I was just trying to articulate them and getting a bit of traction there. And, you know, eventually that's how, you know, we got connected, which was amazing. But then I also realized, like, hold on, this is actually something I'm passionate about. And so, you know, obviously starting to then align with you guys, with the Athlete Transition Accelerator Program, and also recently it's not launched yet, but I've started my own podcast with a diving friend of mine, Yona Night Wisdom. And so it's more just sort of general athlete stories. But, you know, again, I realized that I like communicating. I like sharing. I like asking questions. I like having interesting conversations with people. So that aligned really well with what I'm trying to do. So my goal, just kind of bring that back, my actual goal right now is to keep learning, keep staying up to date with things as much as I can, because, I mean, even in the last like 6 months, the differences are unrecognizable, which is scary and also an opportunity. So, you know, and I do believe that can apply to anyone, because things are changing so quickly. If you do a bit of work on learning how to prompt, you can then suddenly, you know, you can be ahead of so many people so quickly, because new technology is coming out all the time. But, you know, I'm sort of digressing a bit there. But the point is, my goal now is actually more to continue these avenues of my own social media, in terms of developing, you know, audiences and, you know, community, that sort of thing. And then developing my own products and things alongside that. Yeah, that's the model that it's kind of taken me to now.
Yeah, no, and on the one hand, I can imagine people listening and go, "Wow, that intimidates me because it's pinballing." But actually, with the benefit of what we get to experience on a daily basis, Freddie, talking to athletes, actually it makes perfect sense because what you've articulated there is a resilience and a capacity to, I'm going to keep experimenting. I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I know I've got a general direction, a destination that I want to be more competent around AI, but you've gone down a couple of dead ends. Now, as you said, you could say, well, I should have kept going, or maybe I was needed to be more. No, I actually think you did the right thing. It didn't feel right. So rather than spend a couple of years going down a track just out of belligerence, well, I've started this, so I must finish it. It's better to say, I'm going to pivot a little bit. I'm going to move across and develop this in a different way. So I think the message that anybody listening to that is you don't necessarily step straight into the perfect ready-made opportunity that's belt and braces, 100% aligned with everything you want. You have to be willing to experiment and go, well, that's not quite right. I'll take an element of it into the next project, and eventually you get to the right place. So as you say, by default, you tackled a fear of being back on social media, which has actually opened up other doors. You're finding that you enjoy communication. That's developing a podcast. You've got all sorts of things. So the reward of getting into those uncomfortable areas and the reward of being willing to keep changing direction, course correcting in the same overall direction, but sort of slightly different routes being developed, is that you're narrowing that down. So I think it's a really good example for people listening that it doesn't happen overnight, but if you stay the course, you will eventually get to the destination that maximizes your fulfillment. So I think that's to your credit, and I think people are going to enjoy watching that journey.
Well, hopefully, and you're right. I mean, I can feel the pinballing as I'm explaining that, and so there's a couple of things. In some way, I'm almost relieved to hear you say that, James, because it's like I'm hearing myself thinking, "Blimey, Freddie, like, what a journey." But so because one issue, one thing I've had in my mind is like shiny object syndrome, and so it's something that I'm trying to be aware of, and something I'm trying to avoid, because I think, if say we caught up in 5 years and I'm like, well, yeah, this is still, that didn't work, could this, and then probably at that point you'd be concerned.
Hold on, mate. That's a fair assessment.
But I do think you're right, and I think maybe the point I'd like to make here, and I think this is something that you both are really big on, is this is why you should start doing this earlier. Because I could have been experimenting, doing courses, and I mean, I was doing things, to be honest. I've always been interested in skill development, but what I haven't done is attach business to that. I was always, it's like hobbies, playing the drums, learning Portuguese, learning Japanese, like photography, but I was too afraid to really, and I'm going to say it was fear, to commit any of those things to business and to money and to like career. So I developed lots of skills, which is cool, and it's enriched my life. But I wasn't being completely honest with myself about like what I thought maybe my goals would be. And so I should have been either doing those same things, but thinking, okay, I'm getting some traction here. What's the angle? What could I experiment with? Or okay, that would be cool. And maybe once I've got my nice house in the Cotswolds, then I can learn bass guitar. But until then, why don't I, have a really, decided effort towards, something.
And I think
go work for this person.
It's a perfect time to frame the question that we often throw at people, Freddie, is what are the do's and don'ts when you look back in terms of a transition and a successful transition? And you've just framed, I don't want to say this is definitely your answer, but it feels like it could be, start earlier. Because a lot of this experimentation could, and I know AI is a very fast-moving landscape, so going back, as you say, 6 months, it's very different. It might not have been perfectly aligned, but let's just say it was, that AI was a thing when you started. There is an element where you could have said, I'm going to dedicate a little bit of time every day post training to be looking at this and ruling things, as we always say, in or out. Oh, that's not for me. This photographic idea I had, that's not going to fly the way I thought it would. And it's not done after you've finished, it's done alongside. So you're distilling down what really matters to you, which, as we all know, removes a lot of fear and pressure. If you can still be competing and fine tuning what's interesting to you, what's not, exploring, then when you get to that point of transition, it's so much easier then. As you say, there's nothing wrong with having a hobby. I've become really good on the bass guitar, as an example, but that has zero ability for me to earn money because I'm not going to quite become a concert performer in a band. So, what do I do now? And the stress and the fear rises. So, because I'm framing what you've already said, is that a fair assessment, Freddie, that you would say if we were saying to you, do's and don'ts looking back, would that be one of the number one do's? Start earlier, start exploring, start experimenting to see what intrigues and interests you and how you can acquire skill whilst you're still competing in your discipline to support you in your transition.
100%. And then it's while you're doing that, it's, I never used to journal. I jumped in and out of meditation, but never stuck to it consistently. I think these things are really important. If you take this experimentation and then journal alongside it, so get your ideas out of your head, get your goals. I heard it described as like most people carry around their goals like marbles in their head. And I thought that's a really good way to express it, because it's kind of true. And until you actually get things down on paper, it sort of almost doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so experiment, get your goals down. If you meditate, I would advocate that. I would advocate for journaling. I think clarity of mind, and then asking yourself the questions that you were sort of mentioning before, like what, that you'd offer in coaching, like what's important to me? What are my values? What do I want to be long term? And even if that is like an amount of money you want to earn, I don't think that's a problem. I think we stigmatize that a little bit. I think that's actually a good thing. The overriding thing, I think, should always be to provide value, to do something hard, to do something worth doing. But in the process, if that makes you loads of money, then brilliant, And I've removed that stigma for me in the last year, whereas I had that before, honestly, and it was holding me back. I think from just letting my mind be free.
And that journaling point, Freddie, is really interesting as well, because most people, and we do a lot of coaching with athletes in our other business as well, in leadership development with people are often a bit wary about journaling. But I always say it should really resonate with sportsmen and women, because you are used to really deeply reflecting on performance. You're used to looking at training sessions, dissecting footage and film. You're used to looking at competition, particularly those athletes that are in team sports playing 30, 40 games a year. It's a reflection process 100%. For your own growth and development. It's if you apply the same logic of how do I improve, I need to reflect, I need to see what's going well, what's not going well, and then wrapped into that, as you say, get those marbles out of your head, start to get some clarity about what excites you, what intrigues you. When you see something that you want to explore, take a note of it. When you read something that resonates, or a podcast, take a note of it, and then you start to feel a sense of control. And when we feel a sense of control, that's the thermostat for stress. It reduces stress. Conversely, when we don't feel like we've got any control or any idea or any clarity, we don't build momentum, and that flips the thermostat the other way. The stress level rises. So I think it's powerful whenever anybody has the courage to talk about things like journaling, because that's all mumbo jumbo. Never dismiss anything is our philosophy until you've tried it. Test everything. If it works for you, fabulous. If it doesn't, so be it. But don't dismiss something based on a perception rather than a reality. So if you had to pull out a don't, Freddie, I think that's a wonderful do, and you've tied in the journaling and the reflection practice as well as the experimentation and skill acquisition. Is there anything that comes to mind that you'd say, my advice to my younger self, if I was going back in the time machine, or anybody walking the path behind me, is don't do this, because that will enhance your ability to successfully transition? What comes to mind on that question?
The first thing that came to mind was, don't think that the most interesting thing you're going to do in your life is your sporting performance. Don't equate that to your biggest goal, and then everything else is just sort of downhill. Because I was there, I thought, well, okay, this is kind of like, this is my peak now, right? Like I'm only getting older, rather than like I've got loads more years to be able to like get more knowledgeable and wiser and acquire more skills and meet new people. More like, that was my moment. Now let's just, ride things out and see what I do. So don't do that, because yes, it's incredible. And I mean, there's probably nothing really quite like it. So, for all of us to have experienced those kind of feelings of being on the pitch and, being like performing and competing on the diving pool, for example, it's an incredible feeling. But I think ultimately, probably the sense of fulfillment that you can get from all kinds of things, and suddenly that it doesn't matter in the same way. I think I made a post recently just sort of acknowledging this, about how I really did think that like the Olympics was like the pinnacle of what I did. And so, but now realizing I'm actually so content with, like, if someone took it away from me now, I'd be content with that, because it's just on me to just keep going, each next day, and what can I do now to like be a better person, to try and do something that's ultimately going to provide value. And so, yeah, that would be a big don't.
No, it's a fabulous answer. And as Carl has often said, who says your sporting chapter has to be your best? So I think that perfectly aligns with that.
Perfect. Yeah, Freddie, you've mentioned a few times skills and being able to acquire skills. And my assumption is, after you left the Olympics and you left the cruise ships, it was the development of hard skills that goes alongside industry expectations. Now, I'm curious in terms of soft skills, and we always talk about this with athletes, and it still amazes me to this day how nobody verbalizes to elite athletes that all of the resilience and the key traits that's made you an elite athlete are perfectly transferable and desired in your next chapter. It's just no one's actually sat down and had a conversation with you about what does this actually look like. And ones what we often come about, and it's perfectly pertinent to you as a diver, is courage. Not many people are taking themselves onto a high board and chucking themselves off and doing spins and landing in water, hands first, and not seriously hurting yourself. We have an ability and comfort in taking risks. There's again an ability and a comfort in trying something and failing and doing it again, because in the world of diving, you're not standing on the end of a board and doing a two somersault tuck, landing nicely, no splash. Like, you're going to do it, fail, do it, fail, do it, fail, do it, fail. Then one day, oh, Christ, there it is, got it.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you realized in hindsight when you were reflecting as your time of an elite athlete that are now benefiting you in life after this sporting chapter, that's helping you progress and feel comfortable in moving forward to the goals that you've set?
I mean, you touched on courage. And I think I would, as you said, particularly with diving, it's particularly pertinent. So I will just, share a little bit on that. I think I did realize personally that being able, so because it's really scary, and it's not, no one ever becomes fully comfortable with it, like, ever. And so, yes, you have your confidence raises, but even sometimes relatively simple stuff, it's still fearful. So you face that every day. But there was this feeling, and I kind of set myself this. So the very first time so I was talent spotted from my junior school and invited to a diving session to try and be in a like a small squad that were going. The plan was to be elite performers, and I was 7 years old in Sheffield. Go down to Ponds Forge, local club, and my very first invitation, I'd been selected, and then they invited me, and they took us up to the 3-meter platform, and I refused to jump. I was afraid that my fear in that moment was I was afraid to not come back up. Actually, that was my fear. But then from that moment, I kind of made an agreement with myself that I will never refuse a dive ever again. And I was 7 years old, and I said that to myself, and I stayed true to that. Afterwards, I never walked away from a dive. And I think what that taught me, and this is true for most divers, is because when you're scared, but you go up there and you do it anyway. There's this confidence of, when it comes to public speaking, for example. I think I've naturally, or however you say, had some, some good attributes towards that, maybe, but still immense fear. I might be, about to like walk out on the stage, and I'm like, oh man, I'm scared about this. But I always, even though like that feeling is kind of horrible, but there's this underlying confidence that, but I'll make it happen. It might not be perfect, but I know I can do it. And so that, I think that's the thing that courage really gave me, was I know that I can do it. The other things, obviously, I think goal setting is a massive one. And I think that's something that's so good about sport, because it's just obvious, and also the goals that you can set are relatively obvious as well. So it kind of teaches you that the value in goals and then the structure around doing them, because, actually away from sport, it kind of gets more complicated in some ways, because you're more free. There's like more options, whereas sport gives you this perfect framework to kind of stick to. It's like, well, I want to, score this many points, et cetera. And so, yeah, I think that's a big one, because, as I said, without goals, you're kind of aimless.
Yeah.
Really.
No, well said. I love those, Freddie, and I love that concept. Never walked away from a dive. I think that's sort of like an anchor for all of us. We're not diving off the high ball, but you could just change that. Never walk away from the challenge. You fear fear. You feel fear, sorry, but that's a good sign. It shows you're pushing outside of your comfort zone, and don't let that fear make you recoil. Just step forward, step towards it, learn, experiment. And I think you've epitomized on your journey that courage and that resilience to keep pushing through and not walk away from the dive. So I think that's a wonderful way to frame that. So, Fred, it's been a fascinating discussion. Just something that we're building into the episodes now. It's just a quick fire, just a very snapshot, whatever comes into your mind. Yeah. And so we'll hit you with 2 or 3 questions to finish. But what's the best piece of advice you've ever had, Freddie? It could be swimming, profession related, or nothing to do with your sport. Best piece of advice.
Okay, the first thing in my mind, I'm just going to say this because it feels like a decent one. In Sheffield, it was my dad invited me to it. It was a professor of medicine, and they'd done some incredible work in the medical field, but like really, like world-changing work. And it was a lecture they'd done, and someone asked him what he was most proud of in his life, and his response was being a father. Like his children, and I just thought, like, it just things like that, like, really put into perspective, what's really important in all of this. It's very easy to get caught up in competition results, in feeling feeling lost. Like, what do I do now? Like, my career, like that. And it's obviously, it's all really important stuff, and developing as a person all the time is incredibly important. And I think actually I've realized now that's one of my most important goals is like values. Mm-hmm. It's continual development. But I just think sometimes when you hear someone like that express, just like something about like love.
Yes,
it's so powerful, and
it transcends everything, and that's yes. a lifetime journey, isn't it? Rather than just that little bit of the sporting chapter. So no, that makes perfect sense. Now, this is one that we've shamelessly stolen from Tim Ferriss. When you listen to some of his podcasts and writing, he often asks the question, which we really like: if you could have a billboard with a message, it could be a quote, it could be a message, it could be a piece of advice from you. But it's the Freddie impact on the world. Everyone's going to drive past that for years to come. They're going to see that. what would be the message? What would be on that billboard?
I mentioned that I realized recently that I think one of my kind of core values is continual development. But the other two, I'll say it was three that I kind of like rattled it down to. Obviously, there's lots that are important to me, but I got down to these final three, and I thought it actually like had a little bit of a ring to it. So this will let's say this.
Yeah.
Okay. Kindness, happiness, and continual development or improvement.
Love it. We're going to get that on one billboard. I thought for a second you were going to make me put three up on the side there, but that works. I love that. I love that. And the last one, Freddie, is I know you mentioned about Think and Grow Rich. I'm always curious when people express that about the best book they've read, the book that's made the biggest impact on you. Might be that one, might be something else, but what book would you say? Yeah, it's probably the most impactful book or the most enjoyable book I've read.
Yeah, I would highlight that. I almost want to find another one that's not that, but and I can mention some others. I mean, you mentioned Tim Ferriss. Reading the 4 Hour Work Week was a big one for me. Actually, right. That changed the way. That was one of the real things that made me realize that I didn't want to go down the freelance path. Let's say. So the 4 Hour Work Week is a big one. I just finished reading The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, and that was massive as well. It's just, I mean, yeah. So I would say those as definite big ones, but I will just have a special mention to Think and Grow Rich because I picked up that book at the right moment.
Yeah, it had a powerful impact, as you say.
Profound. It's completely changed the trajectory of my life. And so, not everything is figured out right now. Obviously, there's still loads to come, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I have goals. I'm working on being better every day and trying to improve myself. And a lot of the time, I don't, but I'm trying to. And I know now that this path, this trajectory I'm on is an exciting one. And I'm really looking forward to the future. And I'm really looking forward to what I can achieve beyond my competition results.
Yeah. No, well, Freddie, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. I know there'll be people that will want to reach out and connect with you. So you are active. I said at the start, you've got that social swagger. You're popping up all over the place. But where would you direct people? Where's the best place to find you if they want to reach out and connect?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for now, it's probably Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is Freddie Woodward, OLY. And I still cringe at saying that out loud, which I shouldn't, but I can't help it.
No, you shouldn't.
And Freddie_Woodward on Instagram. That's probably the strongest place.
Perfect. Well, Freddie, thank you very much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your insights. It's very much appreciated. I know it will help a lot of people, and we're grateful to have had that time with you today. Thanks very much.
Thank you, man.
No, thank you so much. And I appreciate what you guys are doing as well. It's a crucial message and one that, would have, well, it's helping me and also, would have helped me years back if I'd have been in touch with you two, 8 years ago. Yeah, I think I'd really appreciate that.
That's it. Well, that's the benefit of wisdom in hindsight. Hopefully we help people at that path on their journey. So thank you for that compliment, Freddie. Appreciate it.
Of course. Cheers, guys.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insight, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.